Well, you win some and you lose some. Men's basketball, back in the win column, baby. Women's basketball, well, heartbreaking first loss of the season. All this and more on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, review. Thanks for your support. If you've been listening to the podcast, you've known the struggles the men's basketball team has gone through, but they finally ended the skid overall and at home and got the job done against Washington. So with no further ado, this episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you buy a Jase case. You can get a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat over 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Well, the Bruins finally get that 7th win of the season. Some might have thought it would come much earlier than it did, as I would have wished it could have, but it did not. The Bruins get the win 73-61 over Washington, improving to 7-10 overall. 2-4 in Pac-12 play. Washington, who was 10-6, fell to 10-7, and they also fell to 2-4 in Pac-12 play for the Bruins, who had been in the cellar in the conference. So UCLA, a game where they finally came out to a quick start, maintained the energy, and then they didn't let down after the second half, right? They were able to keep it going. They just didn't really have that extended lull for UCLA. The big thing for the Bruins in this one, Adem Bona was spectacular. 22 points, only 1 rebound, which is really odd for Bona, who played 27 minutes. He had 4 personal fouls, but the fact that he's able to get the ball, Mick Cronin alluded to this in his postgame, the Bruins got him the ball on time, on target. That's his rhetoric. Get it again and again and again. On time, on target. On 13 shots, he gets 22 points, was able to score at will. Not the most defensive-filled game for him statistically. He only had a steal in recent games. He's been having 3 or 4 blocks, 3 or 4 steals, a lot more rebounds, yet he was able to get the job done, scoring the basketball, and the Bruins got the ball on time, on target. Lazar Stefanovic, big thing for him, big bounce back. Came in, played 36 minutes. The Bruins are able to shoot much better from 3, which is unique, right? Mick Cronin has wanted this team to shoot more threes, interesting enough. The passing, he thought they've been able to move the ball, and the ball just hasn't gone in. Well, in this game, the Bruins shot 50% exactly, 43% from 3, and shot 25 free throws. And while they still got to work on making all their free throws, they missed 8. They made 17 of them. And what's one thing UCLA has not done this year consistently is score 70 points. Last time UCLA scored 70 or more points, that was in mid-December against CSUN in a loss. Prior to that, their other 70-point game came against Chaminade in a win on the Islands in late November, the week of Thanksgiving. And then they had those 70-point games against St. Francis and Long Island in interesting, scrappy games. The Bruins have struggled to score. That has been obvious. And considering the last time I was on here, UCLA, they lost by 46 to Utah. So they needed some sort of bounce-back performance to come out and show everybody, to even just mostly prove to themselves in the locker room, hey, we can get the job done when you win. I remember I've broadcasted for teams that have struggled to win and had long losing stretches, and the coaches would generally say the same thing. It is tough to win a college basketball game. It is very tough. Some teams it's tougher than others. Some years are much more tougher than others. For the Bruins this year, a young roster that on most nights, on a given night, they have struggled in this last month and a half to shoot the basketball. It can be tough. And it's sometimes as easy as other teams, as easy as UCLA has made it over the course of history to win games, it's still tough to win in a day and age when you're young versus older rosters. And to come out when Pauley Pavilion's not rocking like it was last year, And I think it is probably fair to say, we were all probably watching the UCLA women's game before. And I'm not sure how some of you felt when that game came on afterwards, the men's game, and you're dreading it. The UCLA women had just lost against SC. I don't know how you felt. I kept it on. I was wanting to see how the Bruins responded after the Utah game, but that's kind of the feeling around the program right now. And to come out to score close to a season high in points, Washington is not bad. Where they'll finish in conference, I don't know. Maybe they finish under 500, but Washington has been very competitive against good teams in the non-conference, and they came in as a tough team to play against at home for UCLA, and there's no guarantee they could score. Well, they came in after a trip to Salt Lake City. This is the weird week where you get that one random trip to Salt Lake City, the home game against Washington back and forth, and yes, it was on Sunday, so they got an extra day to rest. Great to see UCLA get the job and improve and win a game, because that has been a struggle for this team, winning games. Large in part, UCLA was able to hold up their own rebounding, but the big shooting was important. Shooting and just finding ways to take care of the basketball in stretches, right? They still had 15 turnovers. It's not a good number, but when you can force 20 on the other side, including two of their better players, Severe Wheeler, who put up 27 points but turned it over 6 times. And then when you strip their big man, Braxton Mia, 5 times, that is what's going to get the job done. Cronin alluded to their fast break points coming from steals in the open court, not just nasty bricks that other teams are shooting. It's turning it over, letting your defense turn into offense. And the Bruins got 17 fast break points. UCLA has played long stretches of games where they have not been able to get out on the run. 30 points in the paint, 26 points off turnovers. They were taking advantage of their defense. And sometimes their defense has 2 modes, right? It's they're not going to score, and then there's not only are you not going to score, we're going to turn that mistake and miss into a bucket on the other side. So UCLA ran a bit more in transition, and were able to with live ball steals and deflections. Cronin talked about 22 deflections in the first half that led to an 8-point lead. And while the defense has been there outside of the Utah game, it was great to see they're finding different ways to score the basketball. And it helps when you hit a couple of threes. It helps when you get to the free throw line. It helps when Stefanovic gets to the free throw line. When Dylan Andrews is making shots at the free throw line. Of the starters, the starting 5 for UCLA shot 24 free throws. That means they're active. And even if they didn't play a bunch of minutes, they got the job done. Even Sebastian Mack in only 20 minutes still got to the free throw line. Berke, Andrews, Lazar, Bona, they all got to the free throw line, which means they're playing physical, extremely aggressive offensively, and large in part, they made more than they missed. So in a game where it could be closer, you miss 8 free throws, that could come back to bite you. The Bruins got the job done. One number I like to highlight is Dylan Andrews with 8 assists. 8 assists. And Cronin tried to do different things, where we saw Jan Vide play a lot of minutes in this game. We saw a little less from McClendon, 12 minutes compared to Vide. But the fact that Andrews got more run at the point today, while Vide, yes, he got a lot of run time in this game, 17 minutes, it was great to see Andrews facilitate the basketball. Now, to get an assist, you obviously have to make the basket and make the shot. But then to see Andrews, who didn't have his best shooting game, but if he's having 8 assists, even if he's not shooting the ball well, that's what the team needs more. And when you're making 5 to 6 free throws, that means the clock stopped. You're scoring points, a couple of rebounds. The assist to turnover ratio, 8 assists to 2 turnovers. I will live with that with Dylan Andrews, who has had to make significant growth over the season. Great to see him distributing the ball when it helps that the team is making shots with him making limited mistakes. Bona speaks for himself. Stefanovic, again, cannot harp on it enough. Making shots. When he's making shots, the team is going to score close to 70. When he's making a couple of threes on 4 of 7 shooting, that is what we all want to see consistently. It's just a confidence thing. It's a repeatability, a consistent thing, confident and consistency for Stefanovic. For 15 points, he doesn't need to score 15 every time, but if he's doing that on efficient shooting, that will do wonders for UCLA. And you just have to love the moxie of the team, right? Any team coached by Mick Cronin, you knew, all right, I was waiting for that engine to get kicked, right? When's it going to get ignited? When's everything? When's that spark? When the spark's going to fly? Cronin already yelled at his team. Then they go lose by 46. What do you do next? What do you do next after that? How do you respond? And this team absolutely did that with a 73-61 win over Washington. Now, later in the pod, I'm going to talk about standings and what's coming up next for the men's team. But that is a good response. That's a great response. Come out, get a win by double figures at home. That is fantastic for this team to respond the way it did after how ugly it looked on Thursday night in Salt Lake City. That just speaks to this team. Because there's many teams that would just come out and lose by 20 the next game. Or lose. And that's not what this team did. Which you got to enjoy. The 8 steals, 4 blocks. Most of those coming not via Dembona, which is where large in part the UCLA defense has lived and died by Dembona's defensive ability. Everybody else has done things. The Bruins have made plays. And bam, a great way to get a win against a Washington team who the Bruins probably should have beaten regardless of everything, but they got the job done against a Washington team that's competed. A great job for UCLA. Now next, it'll be a fun time. Speaking of next in the pod, we're talking UCLA women's basketball. They played SC. It was the game of the day. The game of which you wanted to watch. There's the one that was the most important, and then there's the one that was the big game. UCLA, the men needed this game. The women, it was the big game of the day, again for the second time in 2 weeks, in front of another sellout crowd against the Trojans. And I'll tell you how the Bruins fared against JuJu Watkins coming up next on Locked On UCLA. Well, the NFL regular season is all wrapped up, but still there's time to get on the action with FanDuel. It's the playoffs, the postseason. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets in bonus bucks, winning or losing. Guaranteed. The app's super easy to use, so there's so many different ways to bet. Live, same game parlays, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, second segment for Locked On UCLA. We're talking about the big game on that Sunday. What was the big game? It was UCLA women, #2 in the country against a top 10 SC team. Sellout crowd in the Galen Center. Over 10,000 people in attendance for this game. And the Bruins fell a little bit short. A game where UCLA only had one game all week. So both teams preparing, getting ready. What's the mindset? UCLA having to scrap through a couple of games versus the Oregon schools as UCLA fell to 14-1, 3-1 in Pac-12 play, 73-65 loss. UCLA just looked not that good in the first half. They looked terrible, quite frankly, for how they've played this year. The Bruins were down 15 at the break, everything going against them. And all of a sudden, UCLA kept cutting it to 9, can never get anything. JuJu would go to the free throw line. SC would bank in a couple of things. They hit some threes. And then finally, in that final minute, the Bruins had a chance. Got it down to 4, hit a 3, banked it in off a steal with London Jones. Then there's the weird double intentional foul, which for all intents and purposes was a double technical. And UCLA did not get the good benefit of that call. Not that it cost them the game, but it was pretty brutal in the moment, and I disagree with how the officials handled it. You're not going to win, though, when you turn it over 22 times. So we can't point it to a last-minute. I'm not going to point it to a last-minute intentional call. That was just a bad way for the officials to handle it. When Kiki Rice got pushed away, takes a step, not sure what she said, but took one step, and she gets punished. That's not a way that call should have gone. Either way, UCLA came back, fought, down 4, had a chance to cut it to 3, had the ball down 4-6, right, with just a few minutes left and couldn't score, down 5 after one of the ugliest bank free throws I've ever seen in by an ugly free throw shooter there. And then the Bruins, that close. The problem is when you miss 18 threes in 22 attempts, you committed 22 turnovers, you're not going to win in a rowdy environment on the road against your bitter rival, who's got one of the best players in the country in JuJu Watkins, 32 points, 10 rebounds. What's the difference for JuJu Watkins? UCLA hasn't seen her shoot the ball that well. She was volume shooting, 22 shot attempts for JuJu Watkins. but she's so smooth that she got to the free throw line 16 times. I believe that's a new personal career high in her blossoming young career. So UCLA just couldn't stop her, whether it's getting to the line. Even though she didn't make every single shot, there was a clutch elbow jumper she buried when she was wide open to push the lead to 6 right after the Bruins had cut it to 4. UCLA was just finding ways to get back in it, which you could see the heart of a champion. You could see the heart of this team, the veteran presence, being down 15, everything going against you. You're playing terrible. UCLA couldn't hit a 3 to save themselves. They hit a couple in the third quarter. Outside of the second quarter, UCLA outside of the second quarter for 3-point shooting, 1 for 17. And then only 3 they banked in the fourth quarter in the final minute and a half, when you saw the UCLA fans go crazy and wild. It wasn't the same thing because in a night when you needed someone to take over, Lauren Betts didn't start because she was under the weather. She still had 10 points, the rebounds. Bruins couldn't get her the ball. She wasn't her usual dominant self, still had 3 blocks. Hawkes, red hot from 3. She was the source of life for offense in the beginning there when UCLA could not score. Then you had London Jones, who took over the game against SC the first time. Game plan, and then when she tried to hoist up a couple of threes, they just weren't falling tonight. That's going to happen sometimes. But she still hit a clutch 3 in a moment to keep UCLA in it. Dugalich, a lot of rebounds, not a lot of offensive production. Kiki Rice, fouled out, only played 28 minutes. I'm not sure how many times UCLA is going to not have a lot of minutes played by London Jones and Kiki Rice. There's been times when Rice has played 35 minutes. In this game, she played 28, and I wonder how that would have been a different game if she played those 7 extra minutes out of foul trouble. Charisma Osborne played like a super senior, right? 25 points, hitting jumpers left and right, couldn't hit her 3, made all her free throws, and was keeping the team in single-handedly with her offensive ability. And I've asked on this show, which apparently people don't talk about women's basketball, but Charisma Osborne, I asked, kind of pleaded on the show, hey, we need to see a takeover performance. And while it didn't match the 32 points from JuJu Watkins, she scored 7 less points, 7 to 8 less points. She also went to the free throw line 6, 7 less times. Osborne played like a baller. 25 points, taking the steal, ripping it away from JuJu. My favorite play of that game for UCLA was when Charisma Osborne read it. They're trying to make a comeback in the fourth quarter. She rips it away on a pass to JuJu, takes the contact, no whistle in a whistle-happy game, and makes the bucket. And just kind of stared down JuJu, who gave like a little grudge, little scaredy cat look. But it was a fun game, even though there was total of 55, close to 60 free throws in that game. In a regulation game, not the most fun when it comes to a lot of free throws. And I think I was looking at some of the Southern California newspapers that were writing about, there's a bit too many fouls. And it was a physical game. And even in a call late in the game, I still think they got that wrong. They could have had a no call. That would have been better than a double intentional. UCLA showed some heart. We got to see Hawkes make some big shots in a big game. And USC, without their best rebounder, who was ill, according to the pregame report, and then they had Mackenzie Forbes, who was hitting clutch 3s, 18 points, 4 assists, pretty much did everything you could ask for if you're USC. And then Kayla Padilla, man, every bucket it seemed like she scored was in the fourth quarter. 13 points, a bucket here, bucket there, draining a 3. It was between Forbes and Padilla, the only 2 Trojans to hit 3s in this game. And they hit clutch shots in the fourth quarter. Those back-to-back 3s when UCLA was making their first initial push to keep the Bruins at bay, that was brutal. But again, let's remember, USC took 32 free throws, 11 more than UCLA. They made 7 more in an 8-point game. And the Bruins, despite playing terribly, despite playing as awfully as they could to start, generally in the first quarter of games, this team has come out and blitzed opponents. I'm fairly confident that this was the first game UCLA had played where they were not leading after the first quarter and in dominant fashion. And the only time they hadn't truly been dominant against the team in the first quarter was against SC at home the first time, when they only led by 3. The Bruins should have been up by 10 or 15, but they let SC back in the game kind of a couple of times, unlike this game where UCLA had one big push to get within it, and then they dropped. I was pretty confident in saying that I wasn't going to see this UCLA team go undefeated. This schedule is too tough. They had to play SC a little too quick in the scheduling with a team that was getting a crazy home crowd, a sold-out crowd. And I just thought it was a little too quick. Things were building up for a UCLA loss. Maybe in this one, they got the mountain schools next. I'll talk about that in a moment. This was kind of a recipe for a UCLA loss. And hey, if your only loss so far is on the road to a team you've already beaten in a sellout crowd in a back-and-forth competitive game, or more of a competitive game, not so much the back-and-forth variety, against one of the best players in the country, you shouldn't be dinged. And with all the teams that lost in women's college basketball this week, right, from basically 3-4, just about everybody lost. Everybody in college basketball lost, actually, on the men's and women's side, but the women's side specifically, too. UCLA shouldn't be really moved from their perch. They have a lot of impressive wins. Florida State, a team they just beat Virginia Tech, a top 10, top 11 team that Florida State beat. So UCLA's got a really good resume. It's unfortunate that South Carolina is going to sit number one. They could lose two and probably stay number one because that's just how it is. UCLA is still very good. So there's no need to panic, except these next couple of games are extremely tough. And I'm going to tell you about that next after UCLA. Hey, they showed some fight. They showed some heart. Now they got to go and rebound and see how they can take that first punch in the mouth, right? How you take that first loss and respond like a championship team. And that's how this team, a championship team, responds with a great performance against a good team on the road. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. I know. We talk about sports to escape everything. The crazy reality is real life, right? Let's talk about preparing for real life for a second. According to the FDA, pharmacy is running out of antibiotics, and that could be in the middle of what is considered the worst flu season in over a decade. But thankfully, with the Jace case and Jace Medical, we'll be okay to get the life-saving medication you need in the middle of this flu season. The Jace case is a pack with 5 different antibiotics that can treat a long list of bacterial infections, nothing short of UTIs, respiratory infections, and more, because any of those infections, bacterial infections, can happen to any of us. Visit jacemedical.com, complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician. Your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the original cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use the code LOCKEDON. Again, that's the code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order at jacemedical.com, Jase medical.com. Final segment of the Locked On UCLA podcast today. After some big basketball games, the Bruins split them, and I would love for the women to knock down USC and get 2 victories, sweep them in the regular season. That's just not the case. So let's take a look first at the women. What's coming up next? This is what the standings in the Pac-12 look like right now for the Bruins. No longer in first, undefeated. Not even in second, actually. Tied for third with USC. Colorado, 5-0, 15-1. They beat LSU. They've been rock solid all year. They just beat Stanford in a battle of unbeatens and beat Stanford by 12. That is some big mouth basketball right there. Stanford's still really good. They are 4-1 in conference play, which leaves UCLA tied with USC, 2 of the top 10 teams in the country at 3-1. So where does UCLA go next? Oh, all they do is go play the reigning Pac-12 champs and the preseason favorite in Utah, who's 12-5, 2-3 in conference play, but they're really good. They still got Peely, and they've had some very tough losses against very good competition, including competing with Stanford, losing by 2 in a heartbreaker, losing in overtime to Arizona by a point, losing to Colorado. They lost to South Carolina, and their other loss came in a battle against Baylor, who's a top 5 team in the country, right? So they've only lost to top-tier teams, and UCLA has to go play them on the road in this extremely tough stretch because UCLA Their next couple of games at Colorado on a Friday, so the Bruins have about 5 days to prepare. And then they play Utah on a turnaround Monday, where you get Saturday, Sunday off, and you go to Salt Lake City on a Monday at like 5 p.m. Pacific. So that's a tough schedule. And to get Utah on the back end of that after a tough Colorado game, this is a dangerous stretch. UCLA could easily pick up their second loss. And dare I say, Corey Close's bunch could be in danger of a losing streak up to 3 games where you have a week off after that, sickly feeling after losing to SC. You get Colorado, who is very good, a top 5 team in the country. Probably might even take UCLA's perch in number 2 or number 3 after all the chaos. And then you go to Utah, and depending on how the Colorado game goes, emotional highs or lows, how do you turn around and play another road game against a tough Utah team that's destined for the Big 12? Really good. And had the preseason, Conference Player of the Year, preseason pick to be the number 1 team in the conference ahead of UCLA. That's where UCLA has to be extremely careful with this upcoming week. Extremely tough matchups. And hey, Washington and Washington State are no slouches. You start February at Cal, who's competing for an NCAA berth, and then at Stanford, your only chance to play Stanford this season, the regular season, at Maples Pavilion. This is a gauntlet. This 6 to 7 game stretch, if you include the game UCLA already played at SC, is brutal and will test themselves from March and tell us, is this team good? Is this team great? Or is this team championship shortlist contender? And I think there's 3 different levels, right? You go 5-2, you're great. You go 6-1, including winning 6 in a row after this loss, that means you're championship contender great. Not that if you go 5-2, you're not, because it's still a bit of an open field, if you will, more open than it's been in years over the last couple of years in women's college basketball. This is a team that can go do it. Now, got to limit the turnovers in these next couple of games because you're not going to win crazy games on the road by turning it over. And hopefully the 3-point numbers get back to what they were statistically. Big thing is we'll know how good the Bruins are in the first quarter. If they struggle again these next few games in the first quarter, the Bruins have been figured out, and they have to play much better. Now, if they come out and dominate in the first quarter, then it's back to business, and it's how they close games, which will be important for this UCLA team. All right, so the women, clearly tough schedule, and that will tell us a lot more about this team moving forward and prepare them for March and hopefully heading into April in the final year, probably one of the best years that Pac-12 has ever had from top to bottom for depth competitive-wise. All right, now we talked about the women. Let's go back to the men real quick. Where does UCLA sit in the standings? Well, their win took them out of the basement. They're tied with Washington, SC, and Cal with a 2-4 record near the bottom of the conference, just ahead of Oregon State. Now, teams ahead of them include Oregon at 5-0. You got the Arizona schools who are 4-1, 4-2. And then you got Arizona State, Arizona State 4-1, Stanford 4-2, Arizona 3-2, and then a lot of 5-3 with Colorado, Utah, and Washington State. That's all ahead of them. Washington State's been surging as of late. So UCLA's schedule looks like this. This is this big, meaty middle part of the schedule for the Bruins in the middle of January where they go on the road 3 straight games. At ASU, who is near the top of the conference right now. The Saturday afternoon matinee where they play at Arizona. They get Wednesday against Arizona State, Thursday, Friday to recover, get to Tucson, midday Saturday game, and then they play at SC a week later, which should be an entertaining game, but with a lot of injuries and a lot of players out for SC, that game's maybe not as daunting other than the mental aspect for Mick Cronin and company to go into the Galen Center and get a win, which they just have not been able to do in the Mick Cronin era. You beat Arizona State, you can keep that momentum rolling. You beat Arizona, and then there's a different energy going in the building. SC, that's just a mental block right now, playing at SC for the Bruins, because that's just been a place that's been extremely tough to play for UCLA. And, oh, by the way, when you get back home, you get Oregon State again, and then you play Oregon one more time, who is currently the conference favorites, unbeaten. Arizona just lost again. I really don't know what to make of this conference right now on the men's side. It is wonky. You've got Arizona, who's 12-4, who was, prior to this week, a top 10 team, and a week of carnage in college basketball where everybody lost. UConn, who's probably going to jump to number one now, everybody lost. The best team in the conference, at least numbers and what everybody looks like optics-wise, is currently in fourth place with 2 losses, about 2 games, a game and a half behind first place. And maybe UCLA can start creeping up to the middle of the conference with a couple of wins because there's so much parity right now. So much parity that it just it's hard to pick apart. Now, to say for Mick Cronin's squad that he's going to go turn around and sweep an Arizona series, going into SC riding high on 3 victories, I believe in the ability for this team to go perform. But they have to string along wins together. And can they play defense first against Arizona State? Can they go win a tough game in Tempe? The schedule's similar to what it was last year. Go to Tempe, then go to Tucson, where the crowd's going to be crazy. I would hope it's less time those 2 teams tango as conference rivals, UCLA and Arizona. And while Lloyd and Cronin have already flirted with a potential home-and-home non-conference series in the future based on how the conferences work now that they got 50 teams and you got to play a bunch of conference games and you'll make money with all those conference games, hey, go beat Arizona State, get 2 in a row, and get the momentum working. Because we know when UCLA can play some defense, get that hustle bone right, the deflections, get in transition a little bit more, hit 6 of 14. This is not a UCLA team that will hit consistently 10 threes, but 6 of 14 will work when you go into the free throw line close to 20 times, which you can't bank on, but the Bruins played physical, get to the line. That can be a recipe for success. If the Bruins could come out with the energy, the intensity that they brought against Washington, not only will they never see what happened against Utah happen again, never, if they play the intensity that they did against Washington, we might see them come out with more wins than losses in these close games. If you come out and they repeat more or less what they did against Washington, which included 8 steals, forcing close to 20 turnovers, getting the ball to Bona, him scoring, Lazar or whoever it could be next, scoring and hitting shots. Everybody getting to the line, and probably a mixture of minutes from Vide playing 17, McClendon 12, Nuba 12, Feeble playing 5 minutes of stealing a bucket, right? Seeing everybody make moves. Cronin praised his depth, and shortening the rotation isn't going to help this team. I think UCLA needs to see more minutes from everybody. And we saw that against Washington, and it worked to perfection. Now, to do that against Arizona State, we're going to have the whole week to digest a little more, give more basketball recruiting updates. Mick Cronin had an offer out there. We'll talk about that later in a future episode. And UCLA football had some big recruits. We'll talk about that also in the next Locked On UCLA episode with keys against ASU, Arizona, and for the women against the Colorado, Utah Mountain Schools for the final time as conference members. In the meantime, hands up, Bruins fans. They made us proud after a rough start. So let's get those fingers up, hands up, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for your support. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.